Hey everyone, Kyle from Hilton here to tell you about our upcoming beer tasting for Wednesday, June the 16th at 6 o'clock. It's a little bit of 4 beer tastings in one, or rather 3 questions or topics I wanted to get to, but couldn't quite put the whole thing together for these topics. As many of you know, we just finished doing a Snake Lake tasting, but last week they dropped off 2 brand new beers for us. We've got the Lady May Hellas, which is an absolutely fantastic golden lager, and then this one I'm really quite stoked for, Patio Life New England Double IPAs. I'm not always a big fan of high alcohol beers, but this one does seem pretty exceptional, so we're gonna do those. From Four Winds, a bit of a sad one, an immemorial beer to Greg Mills, one of the founders of Four Winds. We have to talk about it because Four Winds IPAs are just so spot on. And then finally, I want you all to help me solve a mystery. I've had some folks saying recently, just through the store, not, a rash of complaints, but it's been kind of been said over the last few weeks, F.O.M.O is not the same as it used to be. And I've had some people say they like it more, but most people said, I just don't like F.O.M.O. It's not as good as it used to be, to And I opened a can over the weekend. I don't agree. I think it's absolutely fine. But I all want to find out together. So, kind of 3 little mini topics. And we'll get to all that and more on Wednesday, June the 16th at 6 o'clock.
Media Boutique.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our Wednesday night beer tasting series. I am, as always, your host, Kyle with Andrew Hilton Wine and Spirits, and just off camera is Aaron with Bird Media. We're going to do kind of 3 little mini tastings here tonight because we've got a few different little topics I want to dig into. I know this is a bit of an unconventional one, but you know what? The wind has come up. It's blown the stupid heat wave away. I've had a great day, and you know what? I'm at work, and I get to just hang out and drink beer with you folks, so that's just a brilliant day at work overall. So, you know what? Let's jump right into it, and let's jump into the Lady May Lager, which is, yes, it is a lager, but it's more correctly a Munich Helles. Now, this is by Snake Lake. This is in collaboration with a local tattoo parlor called Lady May Tattoos, which explains the beautiful designs on the can. Now, Munich Helles is an interesting style. So in the late 18th century, when the Pilsner style was just starting to emerge in what we now call the Czech Republic, it was invented by a Bavarian, a gentleman named Joseph Groll, who went over there, and he took advantage of brand new malting technology that allowed them to make these bright, pale malted barleys that had never been seen before, and Pilsner absolutely exploded. Now, of course, they don't call Czech Pilsners anymore, according to the Beer Judge Certification Program, but that's just too weird and I'm not going to comment on it. This exploded as a style, and it kind of took off all over Europe. Everybody was making these bright, pale lagers, and this is, right around the year 1800s. This is not, the pale lager renaissance of, the 1950s after the Second World War. But everybody jumps on board this style, except the Bavarians. The Bavarians are holdouts, damn it. They are not going to let this pale lager craze wash over their traditional styles of Bocks and Dunkels and Marzens. No. That's just for tourists. That's not the real thing. But the tide was inevitable, and it was unstoppable, and it slowly crept into these Bavarian beer gardens, and they didn't have anything of their own. So every time somebody held up a glass this color, they knew it didn't come from them. So out of that came Gabriel Fedelmeyer II, who was the head brewer and I believe the owner of Spaten Brewing. And he was the very first one to say, okay, this is stupid. We need to make something that's our own Bavarian style of this Pilsner, but it has to be different. It can't just be this funky, cheesy style. It needs to be brighter and cleaner because hops aren't like a big part of Bavarian brewing. It's more about the malts. So that's where Munich Helles came from. It's bright and fresh and clean, and it's an easy drinking lager, but without kind of that dank Czech character. It was something that the Bavarians wanted to call their own, and as such, the yeast had to be more important, which is difficult in a lager because the yeast is always very subdued, just part of the lagering process, as well as a big grain character. Let's see how this holds up. And I would say it holds up very well. I get bright, fresh, clean grain character. I don't get very much for hops on this at all. I look down here and Craig's already asked New World hops. I'm not picking them up. If they're there, they're very subtle. 23 IBUs, so there's definitely hops here. Okay, there's the hops. The hops are there. I would actually say no. I'd say those have got to be European hops. Did they say anything on the can? They do say noble hops, and generally when they say noble hops, they mean European hops. So I will go ahead and say no. I would be very. They might be grown in North America, but they're not North American varieties like Amarillo or Cascade or Citra. These are going to be European varieties. Whether they're grown in Europe or not, maybe not, but they're definitely European varieties. And yes, I finally got a haircut. The barbers are open again. Thank goodness. And was that our very first comment? Just about. The haircut's going to take the #1 spot tonight. Well, quite possibly. Is this a Hellas? Well, I'm going to take that on the... I mean, there's an argument that could say no, because Hellas is Munich Hellas, and if it's not made in Munich, it's not really Hellas. The city of Cologne in Germany has very much taken that stance with Kolsch, and they've actually started litigation to prevent anyone from using the term Kolsch who doesn't brew their beer in Cologne. You can use Kolsch style, but I don't think the folks in Munich have been that, die hard about the name branding, at least not yet. So if you're being an absolute snobby purist, I'd say no, it can't be because it's not made in Munich. It's made in Sylvan Lake, Alberta. However, on the other angle, is it a very true to style, very faithful reproduction of a traditional Munich Hellas? I'm going to go yes. Every once in a while, I get a free bowl of soup with a haircut. I did not, and I feel ripped off.
That's a good joke. I like that. Caddyshack.
God, everybody's just right after me, aren't they? That's great. Love it.
Gonna like that one.
Of course you're going to like that one, Aaron. Thank you.
I don't know if I'm representing the store or myself, but I feel like it's fine.
Hey, I'm just pleased to still be able to get a haircut. So, you know what? Glass houses, Aaron. Glass houses. But yeah, I would say it is a very faithful reproduction of a Hellas rather than a Hellas adjacent. I would say it would be more Hellas adjacent if it was a fruited Hellas, or it's a little bit darker, or maybe they use a little bit of smoked malt, or they'd use North American hops. But I would say that, again, it's not really from Munich, but otherwise I would say this is absolutely as faithful a reproduction of a Hellas as you could do in Alberta. And damn it, Lorraine, that is a really good comment. I can't even take anything away from that.
It's a good joke.
What do you think of this one, Aaron?
That's good. It's
Yeah?
nice. It's smooth.
Yeah, it's kind of clean, bright.
Alcohol in it.
I would assume quite low. 4.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a sticker or is that actually on the... No, it's right on the label. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hot day. I mean, it'd be... Okay, I'm not wishing for the heat wave to come back by any means. That heat wave needed to go away, but I could be really into this if it was still 35.
For sure. Yeah.
Like, you don't even
What's
take the
chalkiness that it happens to. Is that just me? Is it water that does that?
Yeah, Nigel commented it's the water profile, and I
yeah,
think he's
okay.
right. Yeah. The downside of doing a really clean lager like this is there isn't that much to talk about. I mean, they're very simple beers. It's like, that's good. There's not a lot here to get into here. It's like, we're not going to dig into the hop profile. We've talked about the history already. We talked a little bit about Snake Lake, and we just had them on as guests. Yeah, we've won. It's over. Let's just go past it. Yes, and that's true, Eric. They did actually mention that they're getting more and more into water control. And that's perfectly reasonable. And I imagine that based on our conversation with Adam Nackbauer a couple weeks ago, the water that they've taken out of the lake has been completely stripped down to nothing. And then they've remineralized it and adjusted the pH to, if not exactly what the water source would be in Munich, to exactly what they want it to be to show off this beer. So the water profile is not an artifact. The water profile here is absolutely by design and quite intentional. Yeah, Johnny Bean, I actually talked to John on Saturday about his water profile. That guy's a giant water nerd, and I mean that in the kindest way humanly possible, because that guy, like, he put so much time and effort into his water, and I apologize if Sonder is doing the same thing, I don't know. But John, just like what he does to his water is crazy. Okay, so that one was fairly short, but it's a fairly simple beer. Let's dive in, and we'll return to Snake Lake here when we get to the double IPA. But this is the one I really kind of want to dig into. Pinapple F.O.M.O. When this first launched kind of at the very start of the pandemic, this was everything. Like, we would bring in 6-8 flats a week of Pinapple F.O.M.O. It would go out almost overnight. It was just such a smash hit. And it's done pretty well for us since, but lately it's really fallen off, and I actually had a customer who bought it on the regular come in and say, you know what, Pinapple F.O.M.O's just not the same anymore. And when I heard that, I was like, okay, we kind of need to go back and retaste it. I took a can and I actually retasted it, and I thought, it tastes about the same to me, but I'm just one person. Granted, I'm an entitled idiot who has the opportunity to talk to all of you about beer for an hour every Wednesday, but I'm just one person. So I do want to dig into the F.O.M.O here, and I want lots of comments on this one, because I want to know if everybody else feels like this is still the same beer. And I'm curious, the conversation I really want to dig into from this is, has the beer changed, or has this massive flood of super cool sours from Super Flux and Establishment and Zero Issue and Cabin as well, 88's done a few, but just the massive amount of cool sours, and let us not forget Snake Lake's Mrs. Dingwall's my favorite sour. Have we just gotten so spoiled with sours that while this was revolutionary when COVID first started, maybe it's just been left behind a little bit? This is kind of the conversation we had about the Blind Man New England Pale. I think it's an interesting conversation to have. Has the beer changed, or have we? Deirdre, straight in that you think it's our palates that have changed? So I'm going to, without tasting or smelling this, I'm going to say that I remember this having just a little bit of a hop nose. The pineapple was right on top. The sourness was appropriate, but it kind of had a nice, I don't know if they add lacto to this or not, but kind of had like a nice lactic sweet and sour lemon meringue pie thing. I definitely got a very sweet lemon character on this. But yeah, the pineapple was always very subdued for me in the mouth. It tended to be more lemon meringue. So I'm curious if that continues forward. That's my back of memory reference for this. If you came in and asked, oh, how's the Pinapple F.O.M.O? I'd say, well, it starts out hoppy and it kind of moves into like pineapple or lemon meringue pie. Also, why don't we do other meringue pies? Like, why is there not lime meringue pie or grapefruit meringue? There should be more meringue pies. There's a whole world of citrus out there. Okay, I definitely get a meringue note. Like right off the top of this, I get like fresh, toasty meringue. I actually had less hops than I remember on this. Like, I'm not really picking up anything I describe as a hoppy aroma. I definitely get like pineapple into lemon, and I think it's the fact that this has that distinct meringue note that it's making me smell pineapple and think lemon. This is substantially less sour than I remember it. I will say that. And yeah, it does taste like lemon meringue pie in the mouth, like immediately to me. I remember this being tartar. And I did have about a half glass of Mrs. Dingwall sour right before we got started here, and that was tartar. I wonder if this maybe isn't sour enough for people these days. Like, is anybody tasting this and saying, I wish this was more sour? Is pineapple a traditional fruit for beer? Definitely not, because there weren't pineapples in 16th century Western Europe, which is kind of where our big classic styles like English bitter and stout, and again, I'm 3 centuries too early, let's say 19th century Western Europe, our styles like Pilsner and Helles and stout and porter and pale ale and bitter and all that. I mean, we definitely knew pineapples existed, but they weren't coming over on ships and being brewed with. If they were coming to Europe, they were going to be ludicrously expensive, luxuries for people. Getting to taste pineapple would be the highlight of your month. They certainly weren't dumping, 300-400 pounds of them into a batch of beer. So no, pineapple is definitely a recent ingredient in beer. And I'm even trying to think, I mean, it's hard to talk about, oh, well, there was this big progression in craft beer over the 20th century. It's like, no, we had a really cool brewing industry pre-Second World War. Second World War happens. A whole bunch of people go over and die in Europe, and like the number of beer drinkers drops. They get a real taste for clean lagers because that's just what's around. A, because lagers were very popular in Europe at the time, and B, just because one of the very few things that they could get to make beer with was just simple two-row barley. Running a specialty malting house to make roasted barley for stouts or make caramelized malts for pale ales and brown ales and bitters and things, that was really difficult. Like, they've just come out of the Second World War. They're not thinking about, restarting their specialty maltings. They're just malting as much two-row as they can to make lagers. So these servicemen come back from the Second World War with a massive taste for pale European lagers, and basically the entire craft brewing industry falls off a cliff from, say, 1950 to the very early 1980s, and we kind of entered 30 years of darkness. So at the point where pineapple really became cheap enough you could brew with it, brewing was basically like Budweiser, Miller Lite, Molson Canadian. Kokanee started out actually in the 1980s, kind of like a craft lager alternative at Columbia Brewing. Like, this is not, when there really isn't a big historical precedent for pineapple beers. It's a popular ingredient now, but there isn't like any real precedent for it. No. Kevin thinks this is simple. I don't think simple is the right term. I'm trying to, I'm comparing it to that pineapple sour we had 3-4 weeks ago, where I didn't get that whiff of meringue. I didn't find that little bit of hoppiness. I didn't get anything beyond just the initial pineapple. This pineapple shifts into lemon, and at least I'm getting two different citrus fruits. I'm getting kind of that pretty vanilla meringue thing. I'm getting other things. I wouldn't say simple. I'd say that pineapple sour we had with the Spring Sours event, whenever that was, I want to say early May or late April, I think that was simple. I think this is better than simple. God damn it, Craig, with the haircut comments. Fine. Yes, I got my haircut. Yes, it was wildly, wildly overdue. But, lay off, Craig. Come on, man. Oh, and Eric actually read the label, says no lactose. Then I don't know where that meringue character is coming from, because I would have to assume, now again, they could be doing what Establishment is doing with Jamrock and adding a bit of vanilla, or at least vanilla extract to the beer, but they don't say that either. And vanillas and allergens, you'd think they should. Maybe it's just like the most ridiculously careful hopping, because there are certainly some hops that can smell like coconut. I've never heard of a hop that smells like vanilla. Generally, when you're talking about vanilla in a beer, they've either added vanilla, or you're talking about like a barrel-aged beer where it's pulled that vanilla character out of the wood. No, I don't know. I really don't know. I see you focusing on my hair, Aaron. Thank you. I do. Just the biggest asshole.
Give the people what they want.
Give the people what they want. Fine. Fine. Great. It's just great. Okay, so maybe I'm wrong about the sourness. Maybe it's perfectly balanced in terms of sourness. But I don't know. Is this the case that the beer has changed? I don't think so, because my mental memory maybe said this had a little bit more hop character in the nose than we're tasting right now, but my mental tasting note of it's like, it says pineapple, but it tastes like lemon meringue pie, I think is pretty spot on. Do I even want to know? I don't even want to know, do I? And yeah, that's, Chris, I will admit, that's the power of mental suggestion is, I agree that the lemon overpowers the pineapple, and I don't know whether that's the brewing or whether that's me planting that seed in your mind. It's probably a little of both, because I've had this beer quite a few times over the last 2-3 years. it's always kind of had that lemon character to me, but that's also my palate. I'm actually going to go looking for pineapple specifically here and see what I find. I mean, it's there if you go looking for it, but the lemon's right there too. Ooh, savor different aside, is it a well-made beer? I would say yes. Unequivocally, yes. That's a delicious sour that I very much enjoy. It's got some, you know, keep your secrets moments with why does the meringue character show up, because I genuinely don't know. We've discussed why it might show up, but I think it's just like really good, careful, sneaky brewing. They're doing something special with it. So no, whenever a beer can do something like this smells like meringue, and I have no reason why. Meringue's not a fault. It's not like this beer really smells like butter or margarine. That's a fault. This beer smells like boiled broccoli or Brussels sprouts. That's a fault. Meringue's not. It's just a cool thing this beer does that I can't figure out, and that's good brewing. So unequivocally, yes, that's a good beer. Will it be set to pick up? Yes, there definitely will. This was actually one of our slowest selling beer tastings because there really isn't a cohesive theme, and that's entirely on me. This is just 3 tastings in one. These are some beers I wanted to drink, and I don't apologize for that at all. I apologize to our accountants because it's probably not going to make our week look very good, but otherwise I don't apologize for anything. But yes, there will definitely be some sets to pick up. Eric, that's an excellent point about the pineapples. I did some digging on this. I went to SYC's website. Again, hashtag breweries fix your damn websites. I did a bunch of looking around. Some websites I read said they did add pineapple to it. Some I read didn't mention adding pineapple. Some said it was just a suggestion from the hopping. But I went to 4 or 5 different sites. I went to Beer Advocate. I went to SYC's own website. I went to a couple of retailers who I discovered when I went there, just literally cut and pasted from SYC's own website. And I read some reviews around, and I never came up with a good answer. So I think that's a solid maybe. I would think to get this much citrus character out of it without introducing too much bitterness, because there are lots and lots of hops that will give you citrus character. Simcoe gives you grapefruit. Citra gives you kind of tangerine. Mandarina gives you, you'll be shocked to learn, mandarin orange characters. There is actually one I can't remember off the top of my head that really is famous for giving you lemon. There's actually a hop called Lemon Drop. I feel like if this was entirely done with hops, there would be more present bitterness, and I'm not picking that up. So either this is an incredible beer and they've done it all with hops and there's no perceptible bitterness and I get the meringue thing, or they're adding pineapple. I love SYC, I just don't think they're wizards. So I'm gonna lean on the side of, I think there's probably pineapple in it, but I really never got a good answer on that. Oh my God. You guys are all awful and I love it. You're just the absolute worst, every last one of you, and I love you all so much. That's perfect. If you wait a second, it's what you get when you haven't sipped it in a bit. And Kevin, I see your comment about ODing on sours. Well, you're going to love our tasting next week. All right, let's get out of this sour madness and get on to some proper IPA, damn it. We're going to go with Greg. This is a tribute to Greg Mills, who was one of the original founders of Four Winds. I believe it was him and his 2 sons that really got this thing going. He passed away in 2020. They released it as a IPA in spring of 2020 as a memorial. It did stupidly well for them. They released it again in fall of 2020 and now again in summer of 2021. Now, very much a classic West Coast IPA, so you know I'm gonna like it. I don't, anytime Four Winds does a new IPA, because I love Juxtapose so much, anytime Four Winds decides we're gonna do an IPA, I'm in, and I'm gonna try and get enough to put it on the tasting. It's just, they're great IPA brewers. I love Juxtapose because it's a bit of a wild ferment IPA. We don't see that very often. They're just great brewers. Oh, and that smells so old-fashioned. I get those creeping, like, pine sap, the the smell you get when you've trimmed a whole bunch of branches all weekend and, you know, it's a big long Saturday of trimming branches off your pine trees and you're completely sick of it. And so you go inside and you just wash off all the sap from your hands. It takes forever. And then like Sunday comes around. You go out and sit on your front step next to your pine tree that's kind of weeping sap out of the holes. This smells like that fresh run pine sap. And I get that immediately. And I miss that in IPAs because that pine character is so important to classic West Coast IPAs. And I find so many now lean into like, oh, well, it can smell like grapefruit, it can smell like tangerine, but pine's such a big part of it. And it can get into, you know, cedar wood and it can get into juniper berries, but the pine character is just, it's so there for me. And I like that. And yeah, it's got some stank. Ooh, yeah. That's got big bitterness. That's got real power. What's the alcohol in this guy? Is it 6.5? Yeah, it's authentic. It's a legit old school West Coast IPA, and thank goodness for that. Fun thing I actually just recently discovered, Hophead's back, not by Tree. Big Rock is relaunching Hophead as its own brand now. And if Big Rock you're watching, I do actually want to try sample cans of this just because I'm really curious. They're cheap as anything. They're like substantially less than 88 or Cabin or anything else. I think they're under $10 a 4-pack like my cost. But they've got like a Tropic Haze and a something else. And their new logo is like some dude's head, but it's actually a hop. They look like cone heads. Hop cone heads. I don't know. But yeah, apparently Hophead's back, but now it's a brand. I'm not curious enough to bring in a flat to try just in case it's terrible, but I am intrigued. I hope it's good. The Hophead IPA legacy deserves it being at least drinkable. But yeah, it is back. I just got an email last week, and I did want to make a point of talking about that a little bit. Andrew thinks it does taste like licking a branch, and it should. It's West Coast IPA. This is some precision hopping. You know what? I didn't pick that up initially, Eric, but you're right. This is properly bitter beginning to end, but it doesn't start out intensely bitter. It doesn't have a bitterness spike in the middle. I wouldn't even say it finishes more bitter than it starts, which most West Coast IPAs do. They have a bit of a sweet start, and then they have a very bitter finish. This is actually fairly flat with perceivable bitterness all the way through. And the caramel's right there. It's building up the... This is a very, very intensely bitter beer. Did they give you the IBUs? 50. That's actually less than I thought. I would have guessed that more like 65. It's a properly bitter West Coast IPA, but it's very well made. The hopping is very precise. I will say I'm not going to keep coming back to the glass, colors, colors, children, the colors. I'm not going to come back to the glass and rediscover something every single time, I don't think. I mean, there's grapefruit, there's navel orange, there's definitely kind of your pine, cedar, juniper thing. And then beyond that, I mean, if you really dig into it, you can get a little bit like malt sweetness. But it's not a desperately complex beer, but it's very faithful to that old school West Coast style. And I kind of like the can because it looks like a beer that we'd have had on the shelves 10 years ago. It's very much a early 2000s craft beer label in a way. And that bitterness is lingering, you're right. And yeah, Chris, you're right. It is the caramel. So let's throw out hazy IPAs because they're a completely different animal. But back when IPAs used to be really screamingly bitter, to prevent them from being like undrinkably bitter, from being frankly gross. I've had some really off-balance IPAs. They're terrible and you don't want to drink them. You needed to balance that bitterness with sweetness. And now we've got ways you can kind of cheat your way around that with hazies. But, back in the old school West Coast days, you basically always added just enough caramelized malt to balance out the bitterness, but no more. Because you didn't want it to be grainy, you didn't want it to be sweet, you didn't want it to be messy. You wanted it to be reasonably dry. But the more bitterness you added, the more caramel malt you had to add, the darker the beer became. And you needed that just to balance out the bitter. Without it, the beer was just completely disgusting. And there were many examples of that. I think I've made fun of it a few times, but McKellar's 1000 IBU, which was a chemistry experiment in a bottle, it was just dreadful stuff. But yeah, you needed that sweetness to make this work.
What's the range of human bitterness? What's the IBU that you can taste?
You can taste up to 100 IBUs. So they did 10 times that with 1000 IBU. And see, this is one of those things where, yes, 1000 is a gimmick, but I'm also not 100% convinced that 100 is the actual perceptible limit for people. Right. I've had beers that advertise themselves at 175, and I found them more bitter than some of the stuff I've had in the high 90 range. I don't know. I don't think it's somewhere we need to go. I don't think I really enjoy a beer over 100 IBUs anymore. And also, I don't think there's the appetite for it from the consumer, post, super saturation and Blyman New England Pale and all that. This is a 50 IBU beer, and I'm actually overselling it thinking it's a 65. We're not used to that big bitterness anymore, and I kind of think that's a better world to live in than people trying to, min-max bitterness. I'd rather live in a world where 50 tastes very bitter. I think that's better. Is IBU a science thing or a cupping thing? I don't know. I just kind of went off on it a little bit, but I really truly don't know. I imagine, no, I'd be purely speculating if I went any further. I don't know. It might be a cupping thing. I would assume that somebody at some point did a study and one person said that this level, which is going to be 100 IBUs, is the maximum bitterness a human tongue can taste, and they kind of based their scale off of that one piece of research. But I mean, if that study was bogus, the whole IBU system's bogus. So I don't know. I genuinely don't know the history of the IBU system, but that is definitely something I'm going to look up after this.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, we understand the range of human hearing and the,
and yeah, the range of the maximum acidity you can taste, and the acid salt balance thing, and and how acidity, you only taste the most acidic thing, but with bitterness it stacks and the bitterness just builds in your mouth. Yeah, there's lots of things we understand. Just I don't know if the IBU thing is complete madness and woo, or if it's actually a thing that's been rigorously tested. I'll be honest, being on the tasting side of things, most of it's woo. There's very little that's rigorously tested.
Yeah, it's like a colloquial science or something. It's enough for us to it seems like it makes sense when you look at, a measurement of IBUs on a beer can. It's like, okay, I automatically know generally.
Yeah, and we're going to get really off topic here, but I mean, SRM is measured using intense light and a spectrometer to actually give you your color measurement. That's legit. Right. I also think that professional or formalized tasting schedules like WSET or the ISG do, where it's we're going to assign all of these wines a numerical score. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. I mean, I love the idea of a 100-point wine. I'd love the idea that, wine judges are completely impartial and not impacted by advertising or what they had for breakfast that day or what their own internal pH is doing, or whether they've got a cold or if they're just in a bad mood. I know that my palate about once every 60 days just doesn't show up, and I taste everything as just absolutely candy sweet. Even black coffee to me tastes like coffee with 3 sugars in it.
Yeah.
And if I was a beer judge or a wine judge, I would hope that I'd sit down that day and be nope, not judging anything today. But the thing is, if you're writing a book or you're a professional wine judge for a magazine, you kind of have deadlines and things to hit. I find professional scoring and reviewing of anything as subjective as wine as being tantamount to just irrelevant. to a certain point, like professional music reviewing. I mean, this is going to lead into a whole thing about Pitchfork, but yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
How do you review something that's subjective? Exactly. I actually like Marmite, by the way, but that's fair.
Marmite. I didn't see the comparison.
Yeah, IBU is calculated using, and yes, you're right. It's alpha and beta acid, predominantly coming from the hops, well, entirely coming from the hops, but it's mostly alpha acid and some beta humulone as well. And it's basically calculated as a concentration. It does substantially impact the pH because it is an acid. So generally IPAs are much, much more acidic. I don't know. I don't know some of the brewing science behind it too much. And to be honest, a lot of our guests haven't either when I've really pressed them on it. So no, it's one of those things that's either very emergent or very subjective.
Need a scientist.
We need a scientist.
Need a scientist.
Okay, let's talk about some other entirely subjective tastings we have coming up. For everybody, Father's Day is this weekend, so we're going to do our now 2 years running Father's Day whiskey tasting. And I think we've got an absolutely corking lineup for you this time. We're going to do all malt whiskeys. We're going to do one single malt Scotch, and then we're just going to do some outside Scotland stuff. Now, let's start with the whiskey that was kind of the impetus for this idea. This is the Waterford Gaia. This is the whiskey we had to open 3 of because none of us could stay out of the bottle once it was open. And mysteriously, about 8 ounces out of the second tasting bottle got drank. I'd like to be mad about it if I wasn't also guilty of drinking more than I should out of that bottle, because this whiskey is just that damn good. Best Irish whiskey I've ever had. Absolutely love it. Think it's brilliant. I really hope that someday the rest of the Waterford line is this good, because my God, it's special. Next up, from Calgary, Burwood Distilling. These are the folks who did the pre-mixed, really good boozy kombuchas that no one bought. They're doing a really, really fun Canadian single malt, about 3.5 years old, called The Scientists. You know what? I'm sometimes skeptical, and rightfully so, of single malts made outside of Scotland. Because, I mean, this is Canada. Single malt whiskey isn't what we do. We make rye whiskey. We make it very well, or we could if we did it better. I do like this. And I like it because it's only 3.5 years old. It's fun. It's sprightly. It's spicy. It's got a lot of fruit character. It's an interesting dram. And it kind of opens the conversation of, whenever Andrew Gray came here, he, who was the global sales director of Brookladdy back when Brookladdy was cool, he used to say, somebody needs to start making single malt Scotch or single malt whiskey in Alberta. They need to start doing it because your water's perfect, you have access to peat, you have great barley. Like a lot of our barley for our distillery comes from Alberta at that point. Brookladdy since 2014 has been 100% Scotland sourced for all their barleys. But the barley was great, the water was great, you could get peat here. Why aren't you making Scotch like this or single malt whiskey like this? You should be. And now Burwood is. And they're doing it very well, and I can't wait to see what the results are on this. I do occasionally do some barrel buys. This is something that's kind of in the back of my mind as a barrel buy. Finally, let's talk about the most expensive, overpriced, single malt whiskey industry in the world, Japan. This isn't even a single malt. It's $106. You'd think it was a single malt. It's not, but it comes in a spiffy green bottle. This is a 9-year blended whiskey, which is both malt and grain whiskeys by Toguchi. This is an interesting one for me because I wanted to talk about Japanese whiskey. I wanted to show something that I liked and would show against these others that I thought was a quality product. But man, Japanese whiskey is expensive. So this, in terms of price, should be on par, if not better, than all of these. I think it is, by like $1 or $2, the most expensive thing on the table. It's also the only blend. It's also the only one at 40% instead of like 43 or 46 or 50. We'll see. But I wanted to keep, and the reason I did choose this was price and reputation. This is very well regarded, and it fit in the same wheelhouse as everything else. Tasting tickets for the Father's Day whiskey tasting are $30 to get 4 1-ounce samples of each.
This one.
Well, I'm not going to talk about the Scotch. It's Scotch. It's the control group. It's what we're comparing everything against. You don't talk about the control group. I mean, that's not part of the experiment. Well, I mean, it's a fundamentally important part of the experiment, but it's not the fun part of the experiment. But yes, we do have Glenelgan by Signatory. Glenelgan is a classic, like, Speyside distillery. Signatory is an excellent bottler. This is their no-chill filtered selection at like 106.95, which I think is exactly depending on what we're charging for the Taguchi. It's there because I wanted something excellent, classically made, 46% alcohol, just something I knew very well that we could use as a base sample to compare everything else to. If you can compare with this Glenelgan, you can compare to anything else in the world because that's just good whiskey. Beer tasting next week. It's an answer to all of you who think we're doing too many sours. We're answering by doing more damn sours. But we're apologizing for it by doing Superflux. 4 beers. Also, the promo for this is going to be something.
Destined for greatness.
It's destined for, well, I wouldn't say greatness. It's destined for something. We are going to do some fun summer sours. This started out as being like a dry hop sours tasting. I was like, oh, we should do F.O.M.O. And everyone's like, no, you're doing F.O.M.O this week, you stupid idiot. Like, you need to do something different. So we're doing Beets by Sinden. We've talked about and teased this beer a little bit. It's by Town Square Brewing at Edmonton. It's a beet sour, and I really, really like it because I love beets. And I also love Tom Robbins novels, so it kind of fits both of those holes. I really like this beer. And then we're going to do it against Superflux's Nova, which is a dry hop sour, Mangalomaniac, which is a mango dry hop sour. And then finally, after like a year and change, our first Steamworks beer on the channel, which is very strange. It should not have taken this long. We're going to do their Tango dry hop sour, so that's going to be fun too. Tasting tickets, $20 as always, diddly diddly dee. With the beer tastings, you all know the score. I would be apologetic if we were going to, raise the price, or much more excited if we were going to lower it. And yeah, like, that Waterford is absolutely, like, cheat code broken. Like, it's a glitch in the matrix level, like Irish whiskey. It's dumb how good it is. There's a reason that we literally couldn't keep our hands off of it, that we drank enough that we had to open a third bottle. Like, it's stupid. And let's see if everything else can keep up with the Scotch. Isn't this a bit of a spoiler for the tasting? All right, so let's move on. Yeah, sorry, just got a lot of... So Chris Hunt's comment about a Pitchfork beer site. You give us 6 paragraphs of obscure references before giving a beer a 7.6. We tried that. It was called ratebeer.com, and it was really, really dumb, and I spent way too much time on that website. But yeah, it was kind of a terrible idea. And Eric, this is a different thing. I hate what Canada has done with the Canadian whiskey industry. We had something great and we spoiled it. We ruined it. We could have made Canadian whiskey on par with bourbon because our actual distilling ability is much smaller than bourbon. But we all made Canadian whiskey the race to the bottom. It's what the bars put on sale for penny shots, back when penny shots were legal. We really did just destroy our own industry. And some of that was governmental. They removed some of the regs for Canadian whiskey in the early 90s. We really did just ruin the industry for ourselves, by ourselves. This is all our fault. Well, no, none of us watching here because we didn't, own a distillery in the 70s and 80s or, be a member of parliament at the time. But no, the Canadian whiskey industry could be as respected as Ireland or bourbon. I don't think we'd ever approach the elevated position of Scotland, but certainly of Japan or some of the others, if not in price, certainly in prestige. But it's only now, like post 2015, that Canada's kind of pulling the Barney Gumble and like pulling itself out of the gutter and being like, well, I guess I should at least, you know, put on pants today. Exactly, like just belching and deciding to put on pants for a change. Like, it's, you know, it's sad that we've gotten to this point. But just like Andrew Gray said, we have such potential for a whiskey industry. We can make amazing barley in Alberta. We have such a phenomenal resource of crystal clear, like Rocky Mountain water. We've got incredible know-how in the distilling industry. Or if we don't, we can at least import it because we can hire people from better whiskey industries. It's not hard to make good whiskey with these ingredients. We're not constrained like, you know, Thailand, where they don't grow, you know, barley, but they make whiskey. It's not good whiskey, but they're trying, damn it. No, Canada should make good whiskey. The fact that we don't is basically by choice, and that's very sad. Okay, giant ramble over. Rant. Yeah, it was a rant. But, you know, people are here for the rants.
That's a good point, though. Really.
And yes, it definitely counts as a vegetable serving. Absolutely. I'm counting it as one. Like that my tangent was so long, Eric felt the need to apologize for it. Ooh. Curious about the water profile on this. I'm honestly not sure. I mean, this is very East Coast, obviously, because it's cloudy as anything.
Strong.
And yeah, the alcohol is definitely
Says
right
it's
there.
strong. Doesn't mean it
I mean, it's 8.
tastes like it.
I mean, it's only a point and a half more than the Greg. Do you think the alcohol is that apparent even at 8?
No, that's not what I meant.
Oh, you think it's
read
just
it.
big?
I just read it, and it was like 8%. What I was saying is like it's like they've done a good job, like planting it in there.
Ooh. I'd actually say the alcohol is very well hidden. And I know that wasn't
That's
the point
what
you were
I was
making.
trying
Yeah.
to say
All right.
in so many silly roundabout, tongue-tied ways. Anyway,
It's what you were trying to
We're there
say,
now.
but failing. All right, good. So this is their patio season. This is their double IPA, very much in the New England style. This is a beer I actually hadn't had until today. Well, and again, I mean, these I had to do. The Greg I wanted to do. The F.O.M.O, I got one of those questions that got under my skin and made me kind of like, it made me curious. And whenever I get something like that, whenever I say, oh, well, this is a thing that triggered this tasting. Let's talk a little bit about the Waterford here. It's like, okay, we brought in the first couple of whiskeys these folks brought in. I thought they were fine. It was like, you know, we brought in the Writer's Tears cast strength and it was kind of overpriced and didn't sell. The Hyde whiskeys from Ireland kind of didn't sell. Cooley, like, independent distilling bottlings are kind of dried up. It's like, I'd like to have something at $100 for Irish just because we do have people coming in. It's like, oh, my divorce lawyer saved me a lot of money on my divorce and I want to spend $100 on a bottle. My dad's really into Irish whiskey. I want to spend $100 for Father's Day. And that's kind of what the first round from Waterford was for me. It was like, they come in a pretty blue bottle. They're $100. They're a nice gifting thing. They're good, if not exceptional. They're probably $100 whiskeys. Sure. And then I tried this guy and I was like, oh God, what have I done? Have I grossly underestimated Waterford? And I don't know. I wasn't going to spend the money to open the other two Waterfords to re-find out, but I don't think so. I think it's just special. So no. Every time that I do taste them, not every time, you know, when I go to the Owl and have a couple pints, I don't have that, you know, motor going in my brain. But anytime I'm tasting something, I've always kind of got this series in the back of my head of, is this something I can talk about? And it was just literally an offhand comment by a customer. It's like, wow, F.O.M.O is not the same as it used to be. And that kind of sat in the back of my brain. It was like, well, is it? Have I changed? Have they changed? Has the beer changed? Has the market changed? And that's why I wanted to dig into it. Sometimes it's an easy answer like, hey, Snake Lake's got new cool stuff. Let's make an opportunity to taste that. Sometimes it's like, hey, Four Winds has a new IPA. They don't do those very often. Let's taste that. And sometimes, to me, the most interesting conversation we had tonight was actually about the F.O.M.O. Well, no, the most interesting conversation we had tonight was about the Canadian whiskey industry, but that wasn't by design. But no, I actually, that was the impetus for this whole thing, was like, I want to talk about FOMO and talk about how beer recipes might change or how the market changes. So that was, to me, that push in that direction. And they come from all over the place. They're never the same thing. Just sometimes you taste something that teaches you, even something as someone as jaded and does this every day as me, sometimes you get something that just like shocks you out of your socks and you're like, oh, that makes me sit up and taste notice. We need to do something about this. We need to show people why this is cool and talk about why this is cool, because if I'm not excited, then it's bad content. And if I'm not excited, then this is boring for me too. So yeah. This was Eric's fault. I'm so sorry, everyone. The rants are just coming fast and furious tonight. Also, we have more viewers than we sold beer kits, which is interesting.
Yeah, I don't get it, but it rules.
What's the finished fruit skin? I'd say like peach skin or nectarine or something like that. Like, I get a lot of stone fruit on this.
Yeah, totally.
And you know what? Sometimes well, okay, two things happen with it. One, it was a bit of a random topic. Yes, it was. Two, I don't know what it was. I'm just in a great mood today. Maybe it's not as hot today or what it is, but yeah, I'm just in a good mood today. And this whole thing just flowed really well for me from kind of a very random starting point. But I did have something in mind with all of these beers when I picked them. So
Lots of good things to talk about here.
yeah, there were.
Every single one had a story, almost. Middle two, especially.
Yeah, oddly enough, like the Snake Lakes, which is a great brewery, like we had less to talk about. And we touched on the history of Minacalas.
Well, they were just new and exciting.
And they are. I mean,
We should try them.
I'll honestly say, like, we've kind of gotten so ranty and off topic that I don't think we're actually giving the Patio Life here like enough credit, because I will say I don't usually like double IPAs, and I also feel weird about an 8% beer calling itself a double IPA, because I'd say that's like at the tippy top end of what a regular IPA. Oh, that's just what I need to drive home, is that much double IPA. Thanks, Aaron. No, there is a lot to talk about here, and we've kind of gotten so ranty and off topic we've lost the plot. And that's a good thing. That's why people come to our tastings, is we don't make a lot of sense, but 1 and 4. But I really like this. Like, this for a double IPA, I don't know if I want like a pint. Okay, I'd totally drink a pint if I wasn't driving. Yeah, I'd be totally on board with a pint. But no, I'm right on board with this. It drinks lighter than its alcoholic strength. The stone fruit is right on top. Like, it's only 25 IBUs at 8% alcohol. It is literally half the bitterness of the Greg chemically.
It's numero uno for me.
It's numero uno for you?
Yeah.
I think it is for me too.
Yeah, it's good.
And I'm kind of coming down between the newest of the new versus kind of the king of the old school. That FOMO impresses me because that meringue note's so different, and I'm more impressed. Like, I broadly know how they made this. Like, they used, new school hops. They made a hazy IPA. I broadly get what they're going for here. I don't know how they're doing that with FOMO, so that's more interesting to me. But mine will be like 2, 4, 3, 1. Yeah, that's kind of my ranking.
What did you do? 2?
I went 4, 2, 3, 1.
Okay.
Yeah. The Helles is great, but just I want more out of a beer.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm basing that entirely, like, if I was going to a bar and these were the 4 things they had on tap, I would probably order those. And if I had a ride, I'd probably order Greg. But if I had the option to order one of those or like another one of these, I'd just, I'd go through these 3 and then just order those all night till I couldn't walk. Like, that would be my night out at the pub. Call me a cow before I start talking about whiskey again. I'm sorry. Just we've got so many nice, fun things to talk about. The haircut for Chris ranks supreme, which fair. Ooh, Elizabeth gets amaretto. Am I getting almond? No, I'm not picking up, Kevin. I don't get the amaretto thing. I don't get the nuttiness.
In this beer.
Yeah. I get sweetness. I get something that might be liqueur-like, but I don't specifically get amaretto. All right, thanks everyone. That was actually a really fun Wednesday night. I enjoyed the heck out of this. I hope you did too. We're back next week with a whole bunch of sours. It might not be this ranty. It probably shouldn't be, but it'd be fun if it was. For now, though, I'm Kyle with Andrew Hilton. This has been Aaron with Bird Media. Thank you all so much for joining us. I hope you liked the beers. I certainly did. And enjoy the rest of your Wednesday night. Good night.